goodness, Dustin Kava. Good to see you, man. It is another Friday here in the world. It's another Friday here in the world. So that means because it's Friday, you're subscribed to our channel, Wayward Media. Because you're subscribed to our channel, you get the latest news and updates. You get to know when the freshest episodes are coming. And so you knew it advanced. Because if you're watching this, you hit subscribe on the channel because that's what you do on YouTube. And then you know it's Friday. You know I'm here. You know Dustin's here. Dustin, how you doing today, man? Good to see you.
I am awesome today. I am feeling really, really ready and refreshed for this next recording.
Excited to hear. Oh, excited to hear. We have had some really fun shows lately. Filmmakers, scientists, counterculturists. Today continues that vibe, Dustin. Another guest show today. I'm really excited. An innovative thinker, right? An innovative thinker. You can probably tell by our alliteration heavy titles, as they always are. Innovation and ideas is what we're talking about today. So we're excited to bring our guest Tye Glover with us from Think. Oh, easy for me to say. Gosh darn it. I did that several times in practice. Messed it up. ThinkDifferentNation.com. Tye Glover from ThinkDifferentNation.com. All right, let's get this out of the way real quick before we bring in Tye. Subscribe to the channel. Visit us, wayward.media. Wayward.media, that's the place to find out all the new shows. Anthony Travis streaming some amazing World of Warcraft content right now. We got Because Cannabis every Friday. Some great shows that we are working on producing and bringing back soon. Very, very soon. So subscribe, check us out. Don't forget, 420 show. I think this actually airs after the 420 show, Dustin. I should have screwed that up. I should have known that. Hopefully you enjoyed our 420 show. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Hopefully you enjoyed our 420 show. See? Subscribe. That's how you learn those things, everyone. All right. Be sure to check us out on the audio. 2 weeks about after the show hits YouTube, you'll find the audio shows anywhere podcasts are available, iTunes, Spotify, all those great places. So, and finally, social media. Social media at MEETWM, MEETWM. All right, Dustin, guest show today. One you are super excited about. We're going to think a little bit. We're going to test, that kind of emoji, that GIF that's kind of from the Ancient Aliens and the guy that's exploding in the universe and the cosmos again on a repeated loop. That's what I feels about to happen. It's going to happen, Dustin. So I'm excited. Tye Glover, ThinkDifferentNation.com is about to pop into this room in just a second. Let's do it. Let's meet him. Boom. There he is. You see him on the screen. He is there. Tye Glover from ThinkDifferentNation.com. Tye, welcome to Because Cannabis, sir. How you doing today?
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Truly well. Obviously in a rainy Philadelphia, but doing well.
I was going to ask, I wasn't 100% sure. So you're from Philadelphia. We're in Northeast Ohio. So we're neighboring states.
Exactly.
But because Pennsylvania is so long, I feel like you're so far away from me.
You are a pretty good distance away. Yeah, definitely.
It's exciting, though. So thank you for joining us. We're not too rainy here. It's been a kind of a miserable start to the 2022 year weather-wise. Has Philly been that same way? Heavy snow, heavy rain? Because that's the vibe we've gotten here in Northeast Ohio thus far.
We've gotten intermittent. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad of a winter, a little bit cold. I've got an 1890 Victorian, and it can be cold as sin in this house. You drop a feather, and you'll see that little thing blow all through the house. So it's very porous, but it wasn't too bad.
That's awesome here. Well, Tye, thank you for joining the show. Dustin and I are very excited to talk with you. We talked a little bit before you came on. We're both trying to find our way as young people. I think we're young at heart. Tye Glover, Dustin, young at heart. I'm almost 50.
Own it.
Who am I talking about? I just said young, like I'm like 25 years old. We like to have people on who are challenging the status quo, right? Thinking about things a little differently, and that literally is the name of the site that you have recently created and launched, as well as the YouTube channel, Think Different Nation, right. Tye Glover. So let's start there. I want to dig into your past a little bit. We want to talk a lot about some of the specific ideas that you have on there, right? Scaling your level of thinking and a bunch of these aspects. Right. But just where was Tye Glover one day when he said, I need to think differently. Like I need to take advantage of some of these substances that people are bemoaning and stuff. Like where were you at? When did this idea occur? Talk to me about the origin. Give me the OG story of Think Different Nation and why it's important.
Yeah. It's funny that, I've smoked marijuana for years, going back to high school. And one thing I would always think about is ideas. I'd always try to go and smoke and start thinking about the development of an ideal out, whatever came to my mind. I was really good at that because I could walk through certain steps to figure certain things out when I was smoking weed. And I didn't have that fluidity, or I wasn't as comfortable doing that when I wasn't smoking weed. So it actually was probably about 5 or 6 years ago when I was in the Dominican Republic, when I really kind of noticed there was a connection here. And I'm walking through what was the colonial zone, which was Christopher Columbus's house. And it was where he had built it. And I'm looking at all the windows in the top, and I'm noticing the fact that all the windows are a little bit different. These are square. This one's rounded. And there was one in particular that had I don't know what that shape is called, but it had a cap at the end. And I'm wondering, why the heck is that one so different from the rest? All of them built about the same time, 1490s. But when I started to really think about it, you walk away from that experience and then you're wondering. And I think that's what really innovators do. When they're walking around in any given space, wherever they are in the world, they're looking for that which is asymmetric to them, that which is not the norm. If you think about the way we operate, you see a door, it's got the knob on it, to turn the door, and therefore it's a door. Everything that we do is a generalization, but it's those innovative people that actually see the asymmetrical, focus in on it, wonder about it, and then they go through their heads and they fixate on that thing over and over again until they come up with an explanation, at least something that satisfies them, and then they walk away and they store it. Now, you look at Steve Jobs, you look at Elon Musk, they have 1,000 what I call reference points of understanding in their mind, and that's where the creative side comes in when you're asking the questions of well, why can't I do that? Well, what would happen if I did this? And then referring back to those experiences, they're able to create concepts of scale. So that's what I've noticed. And when I was in the DR that time, I just pointed it out to a friend of mine, and she said, "You're very observant." And I know it's such a casual comment, but I thought everybody was. I thought everybody was really focusing in on these things. And more I'm recognizing I'm this strange kid in the room, and everybody else is doing whatever. So that's kind of how I really started to recognize where what I call my instinctive advantages, things that I'm naturally inclined to do well.
What made you actually want to apply this to educating others about it? I mean, observing it and taking advantage of those observations for your own personal benefit is one thing, whether that's starting a business or, whatever the gamut is. What exactly made you say, I want others to understand this, and it's important for others to understand this?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question in itself. I think really, I develop concepts. I develop businesses. One, for example, is something that I'm about ready to launch called Invest Out. And it's a real estate partnering system. It allows homeowners like myself, who was going through a divorce, needed to potentially get rid of my house, and recognized it needed work. And therefore, all I was going to get was cash. And I was going to get screwed royally. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, why can't I take this idea or this house and partner with a flipper and let him do the investment, lift the value up, and then we share in that increased value? Well, instead of doing that, I actually created the company myself, and it's called Invest Out. And so it's a partnering relationship. But I started to think about where those ideas are coming from, and I recognized the opportunity that exists. For example, everything is a process. Are you familiar with the Kabbalion or the principles of reality that's based in the Kabbalion?
No, but I'm about to learn, and I'm excited about that.
Well, there's 7, but I'm only going to mention 2. For example, the principle of vibration. Everybody knows that one. Everything vibrates. Everything's in constant motion. Now, if you combine that one with the principle of cause and effect, for every cause, there's an effect, then automatically it rings out the fact that there's rules for everything. Everything has a rule associated with it. Now, are you familiar with neuro-linguistics programming?
You already know the answer to that, Tye. You can just educate me, right? I am but a humble man, Tye. I'm a silly court jester living in the cannabis world. So I come here to learn from people like you, to walk away from here more educated. By the way, just as a side note, this is the most non-stonerist conversation I think I've ever had, like completely sober, but just blowing my mind of what we're talking about here. So no, I haven't. And I love to soak up knowledge. So please.
Right. Well, neurolinguistics programming was something that was developed by a gentleman by the name of Richard Bandler. I think it was in 79 or 80. And he recognized the fact that we all experience the world through our 5 basic senses of sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. Okay. When we're experiencing the world, if I'm having an interaction, I'm listening to your words that you're using. I'm looking at your facial expressions. So I'm interpreting what I'm seeing. And then I'm having to interpret that, and then I'm having to communicate it back to you. But very often, as a matter of fact, more often than not, the way we interpret something is not in alignment with the way it was meant to be interpreted, or we create our own understandings of what we experienced through the own background crap that we have that taught us negative things about this particular side or something else about that. And we bring that baggage into our interactions in the world. And that's why we're in the messed up shape that we are, because of the experiences that taught us to go in a certain direction. So that's neurolinguistics programming, allows you to kind of step back and step back away from the way you're assuming or the way you're interpreting, and decompact it or decompartmentalize it to look at really how it's affecting you. Is it affecting you in a positive way? Move forward. If it's affecting you in a negative way, then it gives you the power to recognize it and to pull away from it and to do something different. Now, I take advantage of that. And go ahead, Dustin.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I mean, in certain ways, I think it's important for almost everybody to be doing those things, taking a step back and thinking about it. As a, I'm someone who watches markets and trades daily. And it took that notion of taking a step back and saying, no, on the days that the markets are red, those are my green days. Those are my buy days. Those are the days that they do not scare me no more. They're my opportunity days. And it's that constant shift of it, that I think there are more aspects in my day-to-day life that when I have applied that to, I've been able to get over those obstacles quicker. It felt less anxiety over them. It just, my whole well-being shifted. And I think, to put that in perspective, I think it's important, incredibly important.
Yeah, it is. It's empowering when you really start to recognize the fact that, well, when my dad would say this or do this, it wasn't necessarily in alignment with the way I really think. I was doing it because I was taught to do it this way. Look at our political environment here, and look at the way you have people so polarized on opposite ends of the spectrum. And there's something called the principle of polarity that says everything is dual. For example, if you think of any type of an emotional feeling or state of being, there's always 2 states to it. There's always a up or a down, a right or a left, happy, sad. Everything has 2 states when it comes to state of being. And as a matter of fact, you can't find any. Aristotle talked about this back in before Christ. So recognizing there's that 2 state, the problem with duality is that sometimes you can get so far away from the middle that you don't really know where the other side is. And so I think that's, again, where we are today. We're so far over there. It's going to be hard to come back.
For sure. No, I think you're 100% right, especially in that. And I think that's what happens is people, forgetting sometimes that there is the other side, putting yourself in the other shoes, et cetera. It really sounds like, Tye, and what is funny because, you sound so well thought out. Like you've really put a lot of time and effort into thinking through this process. And really what we're doing is something that has almost been demonized by other people. It's smoke a little cannabis, let your brain go, right? Like take a step back and let yourself relax. And obviously, medicinally, cannabis has been very instrumental, even CBD and other forms of the plant, industrial hemp and such, in anxiety release, in letting your brain go. I think notoriously good and bad adult use versions, right? Rock and roll stars, musicians using it to be free. It's that similar concept, just on a more inspirational, personal, motivational level, right? Like so much, let it be free, but let it be free and realize that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. Realize that you don't have to be trapped in some silo that you have put yourself in. I really, it's that next level, right? Of thinking that. Do you feel like when you bring it out, do people say you're just, stop it, you silly stoner? Because you even have other advocates of psychoactive drugs and other, psilocybin and DMT, ayahuasca, other things that are brain freeing, which I think Dustin and I are both advocates of letting yourself go, be free in the moment, allow yourself to live outside yourself, not this trapped social media boxes and things you put yourself in. Do people get angry at you for saying that? Do they look at you as a silly stoner? Like, what has been, as you keep almost evangelizing this, what has been people's mindset or reception, as you talk about it?
I think people are adopting it nowadays. Even I've spoken to my parents about it. They're comfortable with it. They've never really partaken. But I mean, I recently lost my father. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago.
I apologize. My condolences for sure. Absolutely.
No,
that has to be so
thank you. But I wish we were more advanced in that we could have introduced psilocybin to help him through that transition, because there are amazing things that are available in some of the products that are going to be coming out. If you think about it, when it comes to psilocybin, for example, this is the period of time in history where there is the least use of psilocybin ever. If you go back, I mean, you talk about mead, for example. Where did mead come from? Mead is beer. Well, it's been spoken that and Terence McKenna spoke of that in The Food of the Gods. But he spoke of the fact that mead, they normally would take the mushrooms and they would immerse the mushrooms into the honey as a preservative. And then slowly they started moving away from immersing the mushrooms into the honey and just using the honey itself. And that's when they started to get into fermentation of it. But they pulled away from leveraging the ability or the gifts that you can take from leveraging these types of tools. And I really use it as a tool. I don't really use it as a sitting back, hanging out with the friends or anything else like that. Although I've done that in the past, I really see the power in using it as a tool. And I recognize two things. The one thing is, I don't know whether this has been your experience, but marijuana will take you where you are inclined to go. And if you've got some fears that are operating around you and you follow those fears, it will take you into those fears, and it does a damn good job making you feel the fear, as opposed to if you're thinking in terms of a problem or a situation you're trying to solve, it allows you to walk down there in great detail and turn corners and see it from different orientations or different perspectives and really come up with clarity of thought when it comes to using it. That's what I've noticed, at least.
Do you feel like, we talked about the psilocybin and how this is a moment in history where it's the least used. And then, as I was hearing that come out of your mouth, I heard a couple of other statements that you'd made on past episodes of your own show where you were talking about more like the human propensity to constantly be innovating. And my question to you is, do you feel like we are in an innovative time right now? Or do you feel like it has something to do with that lack of psilocybin in people's lives or something else?
I always say that nothing comes from nothing. And that's basics. That's a basic of the Kabbalion as well. In other words, if you start with nothing, what will you get out of that? You will get nothing. If you start with something, then everything layers. What comes out of something? Something subsimilar. You can take that to evolution, to Big Bang on out to where we are today, to even our development and our kids' development after us, something coming subsimilar. But those are all the experiences that we have. Now, when it comes to the creative side of it, I think you have a really great point there. Terence McKenna pointed out the fact that 250,000 years ago, he believed in, it was called I forget the exact same or the exact expression, but basically he believed that early man moving through whatever environment they were moving through would continuously be eating. And one of the things they partake in was mushrooms, psilocybin growing out of dung from elephants or from cows. And it cannot help but to expand your level of comprehension and understanding, your ability to be able to grow in directions. It can't help but do that. If you look at, what is it called? The Mind Explained on Netflix. And there was one specific episode called Psychedelics, Your Mind on Psychedelics, where it showed the brain itself, and it showed the firing of the synapses around the different parts. And it showed the one that wasn't using any type of medication or any type of drug. And it showed the one that was using psilocybin. And you saw stuff firing in all corners. It was just connecting the different hemispheres of the brain. So this isn't just make-believe. This is real stuff, And I think if we were to get out of our own way, then it could be that much more of a transformational period. Because let's be honest, we're in a sorry state. And the reason why I wanted to do Think Different Nation in the first place was I recognized that we are the most adaptive species that has ever existed. We can do anything we want to do. But B, we will go extinct. We are the first civilization to ever know that we can, in fact, go extinct if we don't course correct. You see people complaining about, well, why are we sending ships to Mars, or why are we trying to get to Mars? Not recognizing the fact that we are on no other planet, and eventually we will get hit. Mankind will die off here, and if we don't have a base of operation in another location, man will be gone. Our history will be done. So there's a lot of things that people really need to consider. And my goal with Think Different Nation, I also have an app where I allow people to collect experiences over time. And the goal is to be able to take those experiences and do what I call develop a collective database of ideas, pretty much crowdsourcing ideas from around the world and connecting people with like thoughts to like ideas to groups where they can discuss problems and focus on solutions. So I think you can even do that, crowdsource ideas for solutions to solve our problems.
It just, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, I feel like it sounds like we're basically saying, like, if everyone would just, relax a little bit, take a little substance to calm the brain, like, we'd all probably be like a little bit better off. I mean, it is interesting to think that, and I was just actually, I told you, and everyone knows here that listens to the show because cannabis, that follows us on Wayward.media, that, I teach at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. I'm big into the education. We had a recent guest on, Dr. Hemant Kumar Bid, talking about educational aspects into our industry, in the legalized cannabis industry. It's a weird time and place because we have this, same with psilocybin. I just saw today, actually just recently, I don't know if it was today or not, but just recently, an article about someone being granted psilocybin for medicinal relief, right? We're getting to that point, kind of like the early, the mid 90s of the cannabis, right? The grunge era of cannabis, when Nirvana ruled the world and legalized cannabis was but just an idea till 96 in California, Proposition 216. And I feel like that type of moment is here in psilocybin, maybe in psychedelics. We've seen studies, and if you follow this, and I'm sure Tye does, I know Dustin does, of ayahuasca and other things being used in heroin, and other sorts of opioid addictions, PTSD relief, like cigarette addiction, something, I don't want to say simple, but smaller, like a cigarette addiction or alcohol addiction of one treatment. Come back out, like, I don't need a cigarette, and right now in the US, it's not legal. You see it in other countries. Mexico has some of these, also overseas. It's an interesting time, Tye, because it feels like we are slowly adapting, to the cycle. Do you think, but I guess ultimately my real thought is, do you think it's a good idea? Like, can you imagine a world where everyone's just all relaxed and free thinking? Like, it almost feels too good to be true. Like the days of Greek and Socrates, where we just sat around and had conversations about ideas. Feels too good to be true in this nation. But do you think we're closer to that? I mean, you really do?
I think we are. I think you've got a lot of money being pushed into it, the market itself. I think you've got so much development. Psilocybin's available, or it's legal in Australia. It's legal in, some parts of the US now. What is it? Washington State, I think.
Sort of. Yeah. It's like, it's actually a couple like municipalities of that state.
All right.
But it's close. So it's more legal than it's ever been anywhere, right?
Okay, right, exactly. But Jamaica's been legal the whole time. They're not legal with marijuana, but
that's always so funny to think about. Everyone, that always surprises people.
So when you think about that, to your point, I read an article just yesterday talking about the fact that you've got the dispensaries now that are now starting to slowly dispense psilocybin and trying to push the edge that way to do it just like they did, to your point, with respect to marijuana years ago. So I think there's so much money in it. I'm buying stock in that space, because it's I lost a lot of money recently, so it did tank. But
that happens. I think we are early adopters. Dustin, are there stocks, Dustin? Like, there's legal stocks in cannabis. Are there legal psilocybin stocks? I feel like you would know that.
Oh, certainly, definitely. And we've even built you think about the cannabis industry, there's an entire industry of ancillary businesses that are based around it too. So, with Trav Media Group, we did a job recently that was working with a company that provides a bit of software that connects doctors with patients who take psilocybin and kind of figure out the dosage and what happened and why, and how to help essentially the patient tweak their medicine. So no, absolutely. And if you thought, it's amazing. For every company that is thinking about growing or touching the actual, material, there's probably going to be 25 that are going to be doing something else that facilitates.
Always about that ancillary business.
Oh, most definitely. And especially when you think about that, recognizing what's going to happen after legalization, what's going to blow up there, because right now you have no idea where to throw your hat. And so once it starts to shake out and you recognize distribution channels, how they're going to work out, production, how you're going to get it out to customers itself from the standpoint of the end customer, let alone just the actual retail locations, you're not even allowed to move the product in trucks and tractor trailers that are distributing regular consumer packaged goods. So there's a specific space that's being carved out, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, for the smaller businesses. And I think that's great. But how do you go and how do you scale something to a national brand when everything's state by state by state? Those are the things that are that's going to be interesting to see how it works.
And think about all the other markets that you've seen in the past where the small innovators, the small backyard in the shed, doing this in hiding for 30 years because of something, has actually pushed the industry much further. And then when things start vertically integrating and the big boys come in, there's the rest of the mom and pop industry goes. We're seeing it in Michigan right now with the caregivers who really help push so much of the industry up north, and then with recreational coming out and them getting boxed out of being able to sell their product to other dispensaries and stuff like that, that you just are not in the same position. I mean, it's definitely big money comes in, lobbying comes in, and so no, I never feel like protection is to the small guys. That's not where money is made in this country, and small business and family owned has not been a priority within this nation for enough time, especially someone who's literally just sold their business and exited and is a serial entrepreneur. I know that. I know it is the small business is the greatest equalizer, I believe, in this country. It can take any group that has any type of oppression being put against them and absolutely shatter that window for all of them in a very, very short amount of time. And so, in the psilocybin business, which I do want to take this more towards cannabis in a minute, but in the it's going to work the same way. These backyard farmers who have been doing this on the side are going to come in and either get a subsidy or get some type of agreement to help some corporation grow, and eventually it will be taken from them in some capacity. It has to.
Do you think we can learn though? Like, do you think, just real quick, do you think they have learned enough? Because we're literally talking about it right now. So clearly it's a recognized issue. And this is something you could find out these type of ideas on thinkdifferentnation.com or on the app from Tye Glover, which will have a link in the comments below, as well as Invest Out. Be sure to check those out. Do you think that because they know it, that we won't have that issue? Are they smart enough to recognize and realize it?
No.
No, it still happens no matter how hard we try.
Yeah,
Tye
just made the perfect example. He said, follow the money. Think about that. Where's the money lead and in what regards? And no, small business owners are not donating to the senator's pocket. I'm sorry, that's not happening. They do not. They're putting their kids through ballerina lessons, and they're sending their kids off to college, and they're doing other things that help the community as a whole differently than what is helping the big boys making the funds. But I would love to know, in thinking about the cannabis industry, what do you believe what type of foundation do you actually believe is being laid out right now? And where do you see, I want to come this from like a corporate side and then also from a patient perspective, what good things, positive things are you seeing happening in those regards?
I think the most positive is the acceptance. It's no longer vilified. My nephew still has a criminal record because he had, I think it was an eighth, and that's following him. And meanwhile, you've got everybody else making money off of it, and he had some, and so I think that really hasn't been corrected as an issue, as an issue, how it's impacted the poorer communities.
Sure.
So I think that will be a positive when you see things shake out that way. Ironically, you get caught for selling weed and you can't even work in a dispensary.
It is a conundrum. We see it sometimes. Actually, Cleveland, where we're at, Cuyahoga County, just had a 4,000 expungements of, I think, under 28 grams or under an ounce. In states when they go legal, Illinois had 600,000 expungements. That is a nice thing, to your point, Tye. Particularly, we know traditionally, statistically, especially young African American men, 15 to 25, more likely to be arrested and persecuted for, as you said, a small amount. And then someone who has a knowledge and skill base all of a sudden becomes a pariah who can't work in it because they literally are a partaker of said product, which gets really makes me a little angry, right? Makes me a little angry because it's like, how, it's just to your point, like, how can you do that? So one of the nice things about, I guess, impending acceptance or legalization is some of those expungements, but clearly it can't happen fast enough. And hopefully your nephew Tye, when Pennsylvania goes adult use, is one of those people to have that expunge. That is a positive, clearly not fast enough, but it is, something.
Yeah. But I mean, from a foundational standpoint, working in supply chain and having been in that space for most of my life, you are developing, again, those micro growers, which is great. I think diversification of product is off the chain. You can go in so many different directions, which is good. Again, it's still a matter of, I can't see the way it's set up right now. I can't see any one company coming in and being able to obviously control it all, because it's too fragmented for anyone to be able to get a foothold in control. You're going to see a lot of consolidation, though, I can imagine, taking place, where all these different dispensaries, you're going to start seeing more and more being bought out by larger companies. And that's where they're going to really get their teeth, their feet deep into what's happening. So whether it stays state by state by state, and we never see Snoop Dogg's brand coming out here to Philadelphia, or whether it actually goes into a national brand and they allow for those national brands distribution, states are very protective of their own growers. And so how do you even get a national brand?
I think the biggest issue is, to reality, and we've had this conversation before, but I think the best path forward for the United States to move this into the next century, into this century, is not legalization, but quite simply just decriminalization. Take it off of the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, make it a Schedule III, allow the states to do what they do. Now, you're going to have to put some rules in place, kind of like the Cole memo that lists some things. We'll have to talk about state-to-state exportation and some other aspects. But you said it, nail on proverbial head, Tye. The states, they're not going to want to give up this money and power. You don't want the federal government coming in and saying, okay, well, I know Colorado, you've been doing this since 14 adult use. And I know California, you did $7 billion last year and you've been doing this for 25 years, but let us tell you how to sell your cannabis. Like, they don't want that. So it's going to be almost this weird push, I think, from some of these power states, which will be New York when it gets up and running. Illinois is slowly becoming that. Clearly, California, Colorado, the OG of adult use, Washington, Oregon.
I'm dying to see Oklahoma and what happens with Oklahoma in the next year and a half.
Yeah, Oklahoma's got the medicinal capital of the world. Well, that's because they had no rules and regulations. Past episode, Sooners and Sweets, you could realize they had no legislation. Well, very loose legislation. But it is interesting how the states, kind of might not want federal legalization in a weird way.
And that's good. I'm sorry, Dustin.
Oh, no. Please. I'd love to hear from you more than my nonsense.
No, I was just thinking that it will be difficult for example, that Snoop Dogg to be able to come out with that national brand. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. He doesn't need any more money. I mean, come on.
It's kind of like the old days of alcohol. Like the regional brewers became big. Like Coors was a regional brewer. And back when alcohol, and this wasn't even that long ago, didn't have state-to-state exportation. But now, after the big boys dominated for about 40 years, we are back to regional brewery. I can't tell you the last time I drank a beer that was not brewed within 60 miles of my house. Like most of the alcohol I drink is from local breweries in this area, and very rarely do I drink something brewed outside of this.
That's a really great point.
It already exists. Like we fought to, alcohol went big and then literally fought to get back to what cannabis, in a weird way. Obviously, there's the federal hurdle, but
Right.
fought to get back to. And I think, to your point, Ty,
Yeah.
I think states like that. Like, to go to
Most definitely.
Oklahoma or Colorado and have something that's only there,
Mhm.
it's kind of cool, right?
And then you can start competing state to state. Who's got the best product, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever going to be a state that was going to give us a good idea of small business and the cannabis industry, it's going, Oklahoma having
For sure.
as many licenses and of any size and of any entry point is just going to be, it's going to be incredible to see. I want to go back to a point you made earlier about this concept of scaling your thinking, within the cannabis industry, a lot of the statistics, the recent statistics that I've been reading are talking about, cultivators or dispensary owners, how long they stay an owner and how long it takes for another corporation to buy them up. Right. And so the average time right now throughout the whole country is like 3 to 5 years, and they usually sell out. It was a lot worse than that. It was 1 to 2 for a long time there, but 3 to 5 years. And so, do you think that it is these owners that are hitting this level of thinking where they can't, it's not a money thing anymore. It's a barrier in thought. Or do you think it's purely money and it's pure the logistics and having access to all the other things you need? But I would love to hear how the idea of scaling this industry, is kind of works for you.
Yeah, I think that's their exit strategy from the start. They know how much they have to put in. They know how much they can get out after X number of years, therefore pay back their investors. I think that's their exit strategy from the beginning.
That's so perfect.
Yeah,
I've talked to BC in some of his classes, and one of the very first things I say to some of his business students is, before you even start that company, you already know your exit strategy.
Well,
you know whether you're going to pass that on to your children, whether you're planning on selling it in 5 years, whether this is going to be perfect for another organization that could kind of, bring you into the fold. But that exit strategy is literally one of the very, very first things. And I love hearing you say that. It just is like, yes.
I do something called world building when it comes to creating ideas, just like is done in science fiction, where scientists don't necessarily have the vision to be able to project out what's possible. So they go to science fiction writers to create possibilities. And then scientists know the possibilities they can go into potentially, because again, nothing comes from nothing. If I were to ask you to think about a red car driving down a highway, you have a car in mind. You're not creating a brand new car that has never existed, because you're leveraging experiences from the past to create your thoughts going forward. So when it comes to scaling ideas, I think one of the biggest things that I do is, to be honest with you, I take a big picture about life. I do look at evolution as a process, because it helps you to grow and scale your thought from the standpoint of, this came from that, from that, from that. Nothing comes from nothing, principles of reality. But once you start to really think in terms of big ideas, like Mount Everest started roughly 50 million years ago at the bottom of the ocean, 24,000 feet below sea level, and it rose to 29,000 feet above sea levels, the highest point on Earth, at 1/2 inch per year. So when you can extrapolate that out and your brain starts to be able to scale the understanding of what that represents, that's about the same amount of time it took for this animal called, I think it's a tectonic, or it might be something else, Pachytus, to come out of the ocean, to come off of land, slowly work its way into the ocean, and slowly become every mammal that exists in the ocean today. It actually didn't take 50 million years. It took really about 10 million years for adaptation to occur from this land-dwelling animal to this whale or dolphin or porpoise. Things happen pretty quickly when you can pull back away from our compressed timelines of life, and you can start looking at it on a larger scale. So I really try to teach that within the classes that I teach, because we're tied into 4-year campaigns as far as presidential cycles, and then our lives and maybe the lives of our children, how far that's going to be, our parents, we really don't have an understanding of scale, and you can't really think big unless you really have an idea of what big is.
I think humans struggle to think big. It's funny you say that. I just recently had a conversation with someone about this 4-year gap that we find ourselves in. High school is 4 years, and you come out of high school in your 4 years of college. And I realize there are some, time differences, but that's kind of this bracket. And then from there, you're kind of given like this 21 to 25 to go. And then you have to this 30. And then, so we live in these 4-year things. And so life seems to exist kind of just within that bubble. And you can't struggle sometimes to think beyond that. But just to your point, right? We take a look at what legal cannabis was in 1996 in California to what it was in 14 in Colorado, to what it is now, right? We just had a conversation with someone talking about nebulizers, right? We're not even going to combust cannabis to get it into our body anymore. We've moved past that point. And that's only been since, say, 7 years of adult use. Gosh, you know what cannabis in the forms, obviously other types of things is going to be like in a decade, in the transportation of it, not just into product to and from, but into your body, like the scalability of that. It is a really technological aspects, right? I think have really improved. Are you a big fan of technology, Tye? Like, are you more like free thinking? Are you into the technological aspects? I know thinkdifferentnation.com, you got the apps, but are you an innovator who fears the future and technology of what it could be for society just as a whole, or are you appreciative and embrace it?
No, I embrace it for what it is, but I really only work with ideas of sustainability. One of the biggest problems that we have, to your point about understanding scale, is the fact that everybody's saying, well, when's climate change going to start? We can't see the effects of it because we're so close into it. We need to rise up above. But there's a gentleman by the name of Daniel Burrus that wrote a number of different books. He's a technological futurist. And he wrote different books on the different types of trends that are occurring within the marketplace, such as technology, 25 different types of technology that are going to be out there for the next 15 to 20 years that are changing the game. And so when it comes to that whole idea of creativity, you really have to know the tools that you're working with in order to think in certain directions. Steve Jobs knew about 1G, 2G, 3G, what was going to happen with 4G and 5G. He knew all that stuff. So it's not like he was really pulling from nothing. He had that skill. Most people look at him and say, well, he's thinking all these things, and why can't I come up with an idea? You've heard the expression before where people have said an idea really is given to kind of like 3 or 4 people around the world at the same time. And it's the person that grabs it and runs with it who's the one that can manifest that into an idea. Have you heard that before? People used to say that all the time.
I haven't. I'll tell you what phrase I use. That's funny. That sounds very similar. I have a very, and if you've ever taken my class at Cleveland School of Cannabis or just listened to me lecture on this, I have a very similar idea, pun intended, I guess, where I describe ideas as thoughts that exist in the ether up here, right? In the unimaginable space. And all of us have ideas, all of us. And the 3 of us right now together have ideas, Tye, me, you, and Dustin, and anyone listening to the show now, just because we're talking about sustainability, we all have probably similar ideas in this bubble. And the person who succeeds, not guaranteed, but the person who puts themselves in the best place is the one who almost like this kind of like reaches up and just snatches it down and then begins to put fingers on keyboards, pen on a piece of paper, or even thumbs on a keyboard and makes a plan, right? Ideas are thoughts in the ether shared collectively amongst, and that one person or 2 people who just take them down and say, I'm going to take an idea and make it a plan. And that plan then becomes action. And that's where success kind of starts. But it's a similar concept that we have these ideas, and someone, in order to be successful, you got to grab it. You got to ride that bull. It is a wave. It is a bull. Pick your metaphor and ride it, right? Pick it, whatever you want, ride it.
Well, you remember Steve Jobs. I'm sorry, Dustin, go ahead.
Oh, no. The only thing I wanted to add was it's incredible that over history, and you're definitely, someone who studies history, but it's incredible that, some of the most profound inventions or profound innovations that have happened in that in our lives, or have actually been innovations that there have been 2 separate patents filed within 6 hours or 2 days of each other on separate sides of the world.
Armageddon,
with separate,
deep impact.
Separate bubbles there that are just like, and it always provides this notion of like, you thought the thought out in the ether. And yes, I mean, it's out there. If you grab it, it's great. But if you don't, there is someone on the other side of the world who is tingling inside because you had that premonition, and they're going to grab it. And so, but it's incredible because I've seen it with the TV. I've seen it with, you see it with radio. There's like 17 of the biggest innovations had the close calls like that.
Yeah.
And it's profound to me.
Yeah.
How do you?
I've always thought about that from the standpoint of, I think I think there's rules for everything. Rules exist. The fact that chance happens, chance is just another word for a rule we haven't identified yet. And so when it comes to ideas, I think it's a matter of, to your point, it's all experiences. Again, you can't get something from nothing. If you never had an experience, you will never have an idea associated with or around the space of that experience. But once you have had that idea, then now you have the ingredients. And I think it was Rudyard Kipling who spoke about my 6 honest servants who he sends all around the world. And that servants' names were what, when, where, why, how. He's got a friend who's got 1,000 servants. But that's the creative side of using those words, the what's, the whens, the whys, the where's, the how, and coming up with situations where you're looking for a solution. That's where people are grabbing those experiences. So if you never had an experience that would relate to the idea, you're never going to get the idea. You have to have that basis from which to pull.
That is an interesting thought. We're coming up kind of on the end of our hour. So I want to talk a little bit because we're clearly, if you've been listening to this, we are clearly 3 educational, educated, look at me, right? We're Tye, and then the 2 of us who know a lot of stuff about cannabis and sustainability on here. Tye from thinkdifferentnation.com, invest out. Check out the links down below. Check out his YouTube series. Subscribe to him, subscribe to us. Dual subscribe. Come on. We got about 15 minutes left in our show today, so let's help. Like, we got a lot of big brain power in this room. I feel it. We're all talking ideas. What can we do, right? We don't know about cannabis's federal legality, so we can't take that into assumption. So how can we, and I'm looking for you to help me help them, how can we start people, right? People get started. What is some steps they can take? What are some things we can do? Give some practical advice that we can help people get motivated, get going, get out of their own way, and move forward on this path.
From the standpoint of marijuana, or from the standpoint of what aspect?
Let's just be successful first, because I think you can run anything. Cannabis is just a business that you can work into. So just success, maybe kind of starting your own path, kind of starting an entrepreneur journey. You come from that background. What are just some building blocks we can give them to help go forward?
One of the greatest building blocks I think I've recently learned, and I'm partaking in it, is bi-weekly, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week, is Toastmasters. Because it gives you that ability to be able to stand up in front of people and speak and feel validated and get applauses, even though you really sucked at your speech. But they're such a supportive community that helps to build you and lift you up. And therefore, when you start to work on your speech or you're speaking and you start to feel validated, then you feel less concerned about how you're speaking, and then you can start focusing on the directions in which you want to go in. So I'd say that's one of the biggest things. But another big area to look at is getting out of your own way. I know it's at the bottom of the hour, or top of the hour, but I went through an experience in middle school. I think it was on my YouTube channel, where I talked about an experience where I went through and I was told my IQ back in middle school or high school, which is something that should have never happened, but it was in the area of like 90, which is average. But right after being spoken, the gentleman said to me, so you should consider really the trades. He was directing me in that direction, even though I was college prep material. So that statement alone caused me to think. I think differently. I think less. I'm not as intelligent as the rest of the people out there. And that, for the next 40 years, directed the course of what I thought I was capable of. And I worked in consulting companies from Infosys to Accenture to, you name it. I've traveled the world working in companies, working in high post. But yet I was always worried about that imposter syndrome, because in my mind, I kept saying, you're only this smart, so you really shouldn't be here. So that goes into the whole neurolinguistics programming itself, stepping out of it, recognizing really where your intelligences are. Because Howard Gardner, professor at Harvard University, would tell you there are 9 different types of intelligences. For example, the person who's the naturalist, who lives in the Amazon, who knows the flora, the fauna, who knows he knows the territory around him, or the musician who can play his butt off, or the pilot who understands scale and size and spatial. So there's 9 different types of them. And if you're only aligning around that mathematical logical, which is the IQ test, then you're really not capitalizing on, again, your instinctive advantage, or where you are naturally inclined to flow well. And that's really what I would say. Focus in on your best sides and don't even worry about that which you're not good at, or that which people say you're not good at it.
So do you think that do you gravitate, I guess I'll say, towards the notion of the do what you love, or do you gravitate towards the notion of the do what you're good at? So
the chicken and egg there, right?
I guess
I think it's the same thing. I mean, I'm not going to love something I'm not good at, for me.
And okay. So I guess that makes sense. I always say a lot of that you can find a lot of self-worth in doing what you're good at. But like when I think of the things that I've truly loved, it's been mostly hobbies, and those things tend to leave me every 6 years or 7 years. And I'm like, that was cool 7 years ago. I'm going to hobby on up with something else. And I start a new business that gravitates around that hobby. But if I would have just stuck with what the hell I was good at, I probably, exponentially greater things could have happened, or whatever. But I wonder. I wanted to hear it from you. I just wanted to hear you
I
say
would
that.
say my instinctive advantage, for example, 3 parts of it. First of all, I call it active observance. I'm constantly looking for the asymmetrical. I think I mentioned that. The second one is experimental curiosity. I'm consciously running through different thoughts on why is that? How does that work? And then the last one is active assemblance, where I'm taking all these different ideas and I'm putting them together. So I know that's my instinctive advantage. I do that very well. And therefore, when it comes to getting into anything I want to get involved in, I leverage that instinctive advantage to move into that space. And when you can really find out your specific instinctive advantage, your scale of opportunity is extrapolated out even further, exponential, because you're taking what you do naturally, that you naturally do well, and then you're moving it into a direction where you need to go, whether it's my 9 to 5 gig, or whether it's something else from the standpoint of whatever activity it is. You do it better when you're exercising that which you do well.
I feel really good. I've just learned I have a lot of validation coming from this show today. That's what I feel. Tye Glover from thinkdifferentnation.com, investout.us. I feel completely valid. 2 things. A, I have cultivated, pun intended, this educational entrepreneurial program at the Cleveland School of Cannabis for the last 5 years. And I teach a couple of things. A, I force them to work on public speaking and presentation skills, because I find a lot of students who gravitate towards cannabis education, cannabis jobs, have a very strong knowledge of the plant and of the material, maybe the effects, maybe even terpenes, and other things that the most people don't think about, but they struggle sometimes with that. And so when you talked about Toastmasters and just the ability to be in a spot that is a safe space. I'm not a fan of that word, but a safe space, right? Where people will appreciate you, even if you're not great, but help build up the parts that you did well to give you that confidence going in. And then the other part that I really talk about and gravitate towards is do what you do. Like, why you? Like, what part of it? So many people come into this industry, and we'll kind of, bring it back to the cannabis industry as we wrap up. So many people come into the industry wanting to be around the plant. I want to grow it. I want to sell it. I'm like, that's great. But that's like 50% of the jobs. There's a world of opportunity, an unlimited world of opportunity, without all the legal and financial hassles that you deal with in the plant touching business, that also are things you're good at. We have students who come in and they're like, I want to bake cannabis goods. I'm like, have you ever baked a cupcake? They're like, no, I'm terrible, but I just want to because I love them. I'm like, well, to Dustin's point, there is a line where you have to be an evaluator of your own abilities and strengths and weaknesses. And what you love is great. Maybe sometimes if you're teeter-tottering on that love versus what I'm good at, like, you got to lean more good, right? You got to lean more good. And people, particularly younger people getting into the industry, Tye, and I think this is where they can learn things on thinkdifferentnation.com. They can, this aspect, it's not always about the passion of it. It's passion, profession, like all these things combined. So lean towards good versus what you do. But that's like I've been preaching that for 5 years, and you two have just made
You're
me
right
feel
on
like
point.
I'm a peacock, puffing my chest out. I feel great, Tye. We're
Most
like
definitely.
simpatico. I love it.
Stand up and do a stand and deliver. Give them a topic and throw them out there.
But it's very true what you are advocating out there. What thinkdifferentnation.com is talking about is these aspects of think about yourself, get out of your own way. Like I really appreciate
to thy own self
where your head's at. I really appreciate where your head's at.
Truly appreciate it.
All right, where are we at? Dustin, we got a few more things. You got anything before we let Tye go?
I just want to end on more. So what wakes you up at night and what drives you in the morning? You know, like what really does scare a man who really feels like, you know, when you truly understand yourself, that there really are no barriers. What drives that fear, if there is any? And during the day, when do you go, yes, like I did it, like today rocked? You know, define that for me.
You know, I roll from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. I mean, and I'm very good at rolling from failure to failure. I have no qualms in it nowadays. You know, I actively look forward to failing because I have learned so much over the years, and I failed a lot. So, you know, it's just been such an energizing experience because now I actively and consciously look forward to an opportunity where I can fail and learn from that to move forward. Now, the more I fail, the more I am successful at what I'm doing. So I really have to have that upward trend as well. But just fail and enjoy it.
It's a true statement though, right? Just not, and I don't need to fail more. I think I take a little bit of a thing. I don't need to fail. I'm good with all the failures I've had thus far. They have compounded and culminated. Like this has been a success. So that's a step in the right direction. But you're correct, right? From those failures come further opportunities, come educational opportunities, right? It's where you sit on the precipice of failure and which fork you turn can help not just define you, because anything is overcomable, but can really push you in the right direction. This has been Tye Glover from thinkdifferentnation.com. A great conversation, an amazing conversation, really enlightening. Obviously, I think Dustin and I both, and I think we can tell from this hour we spent together, we have similar beliefs with where you're at. Like that kind of thinking, it leads to success. It sounds sometimes like, okay, I get it. It's not that it's mind-blowing information. It's application to your life. Are you doing it? Are you going to a place like thinkdifferentnation.com? Are you downloading the app? Are you following the advice, or are you just saying, sure, right? And that's something we have to have too, right? It's that drive, it's that hard work, that effort, that discipline to get there.
Right. You know, Marcus Aurelius once said, he was the Roman Empire, I think 170 up to about 170, 179. But he said, although your path may be impeded, there can be no impeding your intention or disposition, for you can adapt, you can accommodate. You know, the mind adapts and converts to its own purpose, the obstacle to its own action. Now, that is so freaking powerful, but it is so true. Even though I find myself in situations of failure, I don't even look at them as failure. I look at them as an opportunity, and then I'm able to take those and adjust them into something that I can literally move forward through the problem. So those failures, that's what I'm speaking of. The failures really propel me forward because I don't look at them as being the failures. So now that's a really good point.
I look at, as I said, I look at this as a success. I'm glad you joined us, Tye Glover, on Because Cannabis this week, Wayward.media. I'm glad you joined us from thinkdifferentnation.com. Check them out. Once again, there'll be links for that and investout.us. You got a home, you need to consider a different opportunity. Investout.us is a place to check it out. Once again, both of those links are in the comments below. Subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Check out Think Different Nation. Tye's got his own podcast he's starting. Lots of great Versus Us, which are doing like hour shows. Great 6-minute blocks, 8-minute blocks of powerful, like, trust me, people stopped 8 minutes. People stopped 52 minutes ago. I get it. Powerful 8-minute blocks of motivational information coming out every so often. thinkdifferentnation.com. Great place to go from that. Tye Glover, I know we're going to see you back here again shortly, I'm sure, because we still have a multitude of things to talk about. There's always room to grow and innovate and have new ideas. So thank you for joining us this week on Because Cannabis, Tye. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been awesome, man. You've been super awesome to chat and talk with. So thank you very much. All right, everyone. That's it. enjoy the show. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you all later.
Cheers, gentlemen.